Are you thinking of starting a business, or did you recently start a business? If so, you need to know a few things about startup costs. Whether this is going to be a side gig or your main source of income, there's a few things you really need to know before you sit down with your accountant. And stay tuned till the end. I have a free special offer that's going to help you track them. Hi, I'm Jenny Schottmiller, CPA with Simple Profit. I help small business owners understand basic accounting, tax, and financial information that they need to know. Before I explain the 3 tips about startup costs, let me just explain what startup costs are. Startup costs are those things that you incur before your business starts. They're usually things like meeting with an attorney, perhaps a business consultant or an accountant. You might even rent space or hire an employee before you start. You might do market research. There's all kinds of things that might go into deciding if your business is viable and helping you get it ready to start. Usually we don't get to deduct personal expenses. There's a few exceptions, like medical expenses and childcare costs are sometimes deductible on our taxes, but the regular everyday expenses that we have are not. Well, startup costs are personal costs until the business starts. So these are a little bit unique and that they're personal costs that you can't deduct, but when your business starts, they're going to become business expenses that you can deduct. There's actually 2 kinds of startup costs. One kind are called organizational expenses. These are things to form your business. So incorporating a business entity, forming a partnership, usually legal, accounting, and filing fee type expenses are called organizational costs. And anything else that you spend for your business to get it going are going to be called just regular startup costs. Tip number 1 about startup costs is choosing a start date. If you're opening a retail location, maybe a coffee shop, your start date's going to be obvious. It's the date you unlock the doors, turn on the open sign, and everyone can come in. But if you have an online business or a service type business where maybe people have to call and book in advance, it's not always so clear. There might be months between when you open your business and when you actually have a paying customer, client, or a patient. So when's your start date? To help you figure this out, I want you just to imagine you were a store. So think about your actual business. But what if it was a store? What would have been the day that everything was in place? Whether you had any business or not, somebody could have made a purchase from you, or you could have provided a service to someone for money. Or you had that potential to have ad revenue, or whatever your business type is, that everything was in place. So what that looks like is that you had a website, a phone number, a way for people to find out that you were in business. If you were starting a YouTube channel, it's probably the day you uploaded your first video. When was the day where it could have all happened? If you don't have a website, you don't have a phone number, you don't have any videos uploaded, nothing's actually occurred in your business and nothing could occur because things aren't ready to go, then your business hasn't started yet. Don't leave this up to your accountant, because your accountant, while they know a lot of things about accounting and tax, they don't necessarily know what was going on in your business around the time that you started. They don't necessarily know all the things that you needed to have in place for you to have your business operational. So this is really your call. Once you have this date, write it down. Your accountant will need to know the date and it will go on your taxes. Tip number 2 regarding startup expenses is to track them. It's really important to track them for a couple of different reasons. One is because they're going to be handled differently than your business expenses. As I mentioned, once you start, they become business expenses, but they're not going to be recorded the same as your other business expenses, and there's some additional rules that pertain to them, so they have to be segregated. For example, if you rent space before your business opens, it's going to be called a startup cost, but once it opens, it's going to be called rent expense. So you want to make sure that they're tracked differently so you know which ones are the startup costs. In addition to that, we don't necessarily run out and open a bank account every single time we have a business idea, and that's fine. But what this means is that our early on business expenses, startup costs, are going to be sandwiched on our bank statement in between grocery purchases and Amazon purchases. And it might be 14 months before we sit down with our accountant to talk about, hey, I started this business, now what? Going back, we might miss some, and then you're going to miss some business deductions. So if you haven't started tracking them, track them now. If you're just getting your business going, perfect time to do it. But even if your business has already started, just sit down and go back now before it's too late and sift through all of the purchases that you've made and make sure you have a really good listing of your startup costs. Number 3 tip about startup costs is the accounting and tax part. So this one's a little boring, but bear with me. It's going to be really useful for you to have this information. If you're starting a small business and your startup costs are under $5,000, you have a really good situation because you are going to be able to deduct all of your startup costs on day 1 of your business. If your expenses creep up over $5,000, then you're not going to be able to deduct all of them right away. You're going to have to spread some of them over 15 years. And if your startup costs start to exceed $50,000 or even $55,000, then you're going to spread all of them out over 15 years. So I want to use an example to explain how this works. Let's say you have $1,000 of organizational expenses like legal and accounting fees and filing fees. And then you also have $5,500 of startup costs. Well, the organizational costs are under $5,000, so you're going to get to deduct those because they're under that $5,000 cap. But the startup costs are $5,500. So the first $5,000 gets deducted on day 1 of your business, but that remaining $500 is going to have to be spread over 15 years. That's going to work out to be $2.78 a month for 180 months. That's a lot to keep track of over a long period of time, and you can certainly do it, but it's a little annoying. If you're watching this video and you haven't started your business, but you're getting close to that $5,000 mark, you actually could ask yourself, could I launch? Maybe I'm close enough that I can make it happen. Is my website not quite perfect, but I can make it live? Could I throw some advertising out there? Could it be functional enough that I could call this a started business so that if, let's say, my startup expenses are $4,800, I'm going to get to deduct all of those on day 1 of my business? Because remember, once you start, everything after that is just regular business expenses. They're not going to be subject to this cap. If you've already started or you are starting a larger business and your expenses are going to be pretty huge, then don't worry about it. Maybe you're going to be able to pay someone to track it for you. All right, so now that you know what startup costs are, how to choose your start date, the importance of tracking them, and a little bit of how they work for taxes, I want you to go and download my spreadsheet to help you track them. It's free. You can get it as an Excel sheet, you can get it as a Google sheet. It's at simpleprofit.com/startup costs. So go there and download that. And if you are just starting out in business, check out my page at simpleprofit.com/start and get my 10 essential steps you need to take to get your business set up properly. Make sure to like below and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any upcoming videos.